I guess he's got to start their camcorder again. Good, thanks. All right, so minor amendments. And now this is all a bit different than what we've been used to in the past. So if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them. So projects that are less than 25 acres can increase the limit of disturbance by 10% and still be considered a minor modification or a minor amendment. So that's a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. Now, keep in mind, as we discussed before, this is cumulative and it's not a net change. So again, that area that's identified on the NOI is tied to the limit of disturbance line shown on the plans. So it's not, I'm gonna, rob Peter to pay Paul. It's, a true net change. And it's cumulative, so you need to be tracking that. The disturbance increase must continue to meet the eligibility requirements of the permit. So what the heck does that mean? Anybody have any ideas? All right, so a good instance of that is you're working in a non-special protection watershed. You received a general permit for your disturbance, or it was acknowledged for your use. So you now have a disturbance that's going to be less than that 10%, but it happens to be in a high-quality watershed. Well, you no longer meet the eligibility requirements of that general permit because you're going to be doing disturbance in high-quality watershed. So that wouldn't qualify as a minor, that'd be a major. That's what that means. There's other examples, but that's probably the cleanest and easiest to discuss. The E&S controls need to be there to treat the new limit of disturbance. They can be existing or they can be proposed. We may ask for calcs to show that they're still going to work. Or if you're proposing new, we'll ask for calcs as well. PCSM BMPs identified in the original PCSM plan will be adequate control to rate, volume, and water quality. Again, we'll probably be looking for some calcs. And that's something that you may want to consider when you're doing your initial design. You may not want to hold it so close to the cusp that there's no wiggle room left in that basin or that BMP. Just as a thought as you're going through your designs. Sometimes that can't be avoided, but most times it can. And it can include off-site support facilities within a quarter mile of the project. Anybody have any idea of what an off-site support facility would be? Staging area? Maybe a concrete batch plant? Those additions, though, again, they're still tied to that 10% cumulative disturbance increase. So now projects that are bigger than 25 acres, you can go up to 2.5 acres or less. Again, it's cumulative and is also not a net change. And basically the same stipulations apply. The disturbance increase must continue to meet the eligibility requirements. E&S controls have to be in place. PCSM still has to meet rate, volume, water quality. And again, it can include off-site support facilities. Partial terminations of an existing permit. So if you have a project that has maybe multiple pieces and parts, you have the ability to do an NOT. There are some restrictions to how that happens, and that's set forth in the NOT documents. But you have the ability to do a partial NOT. So when that's submitted, in addition to submitting the NOT paperwork, you also need to submit for a minor amendment. And that minor amendment is pretty simple. It just carves out that the new permit boundary, excluding the section that's been done. Now, when you do that, you'll need to still provide all the paperwork that's associated with the NOT. And that's laid out in the NOT paperwork and documents. If you have relocation or realignment of a PCSM BMP or structure, that doesn't affect the calculations related to rate, volume, or water quality. And for those scenarios, we're going to probably be requesting calcs just to make sure. So if you're substituting structural or non-structural E&S or PCSM BMPs, plan for the approved design that will still meet the regulatory requirements, or a reduction in the dimensions or the capacities of structural BMPs that does not affect BMP performance. So a lot of times you'll do a plan and you'll spec a certain manufacturer's device. You know, you might have a rain tank that's designed, and a contractor says, oh, I have a relationship with another manufacturer, another distributor, and I can get it for a third of the cost. Will you accept that? Yes, it would be a minor modification. So that's that type of a change. And of course, we'll be looking for calculations just to make sure that the rate, volume, and water quality are still in keeping with what was originally approved. An increase to the project site, that's the NPDES boundary, where there's no increase in earth disturbance. So sometimes, you know, maybe a developer owns a piece of land, all of a sudden the neighboring property pops up for sale, and he'd like to purchase it. And for whatever reason, he wants to include it in his NPDES boundary. Maybe there's a good opportunity there for a non-structural BMP that he'd like to utilize rather than having to do a structural BMP. Who knows? For whatever reason, he wants to include it in his NPDES boundary. That'd be a minor amendment. And there's also the ability to change, you know, permittees' names, address, facilities. If there's any type of, you know, error in the permit itself, whether it be a typo or what have you, it can be checked, it can be fixed through a minor amendment. So the process. Usually what will happen is there's going to be some dialogue that happens, whether it's in the field, via email or a phone, saying, hey, this is what we'd like to do. And the district will say, yeah, that's a minor mod, or no, that's a major mod, or yeah, it can be a field change. Once that happens, then you'll probably need to get, if it's determined to be a minor mod, you'll need to get a fee determination from that conservation district. That's generally, that process would be showing us how much disturbance or what exactly is happening, drawing a box around it, putting an area to it, and then, you know, we would look at it with our fee schedule and move forward. You're going to need to complete the conservation district application. Now, if there's any information that's on an NOI that's going to be changing, you need to include that NOI, and it needs to be re-signed by the applicant. As far as the submission of plans and assorted stuff, it's a technical term there, you'll need to submit one set for initial review. Rather than going through, you know, a few copies and sending them to us, and we end up saying, okay, well, there needs to be a couple changes, then we put it all in the recycling bin. It's a lot easier if you just send us one plan to begin with. We'll look at it. If it's good, we'll request copies, and then we'll send that out along with the letter that's acknowledging the minor amendment. And again, common theme here, all minor amendments need to be shown on the as-built record plans. Now this is particularly important if you're switching BMPs around, because if you're going from one manufacturer to another, one of the requirements of the as-built plan is that you're throwing the operation and maintenance notes onto that record plan. So if you're changing products, chances are their operation and maintenance notes and requirements are going to change. So those will also need to be updated and included on the as-built record plans. So just something to consider as you're moving through and making those changes. So here's some examples. Again, it's not an all-inclusive list. If I were to do that, you guys would be bored and we'd be here most of the day. So this has a caveat, and we'll see who can pick up on the caveat. So we want to switch from a 12-inch compost filter stock to an 18-inch silt fence due to improper ground contact. Under what situation would that be a minor amendment? You're on the right track. So if you're going from, the difference is A-backed. So if you're in a special protection, compost filter is an A-backed BMP. Silt fence is not. So switching up those BMPs in non-special protection, not a problem. Special protection, it may be a problem, it may not, depending on the length of the installation and so on and so forth. That was a good pick, Ann. So here's our topsoil stockpile. I don't know why that's so hard to say. So here's our stockpile, I'll just call it that. And so why wouldn't this be a field change? It's outside your LOD and your NPDES boundaries. So this would be a good example. You know, you don't have a scale here, but I'll tell you that is well within the quarter-mile threshold. So this would be a good example of the off-site support facility. So the developer either owns or has a agreement with that landowner, and they want to push that topsoil stockpile off the site onto the other site. Under the new guidance, that can certainly be done, and it would be a minor mod. So there's some flexibility here that's being introduced to the system. So the excavator, the contractor was out there digging for this underground facility, and he hit a big goonie. For those of you who don't know what a big goonie is, it's a big rock. And rather than having him sit there and abuse his machine, abuse his operator, and hammer it out for days and days and days, he asked, "Can I just shift the size out this way by 3 pipe lengths?" And the testing's good, all that is fine, all the volumes are the same. This would likely be a minor modification. But there's a lot to look at, so we're probably going to be looking for some calcs. Probably be looking for some conformance with the testing to make sure that still all works out. But this would be an example of what could be used as a minor mod. So any questions on minors? Yep. Yes, Estelle.
How does a field change minor amendment recovery unit doing affect the renewal of an NPDES permit? Can you check the box that there's nothing changed in the plans, or?
So that's a good question, and it's sort of a nuance. That a change was approved under the old NPDES plan, and to repeat the question is, how do minor modifications, field changes impact renewals and having to provide new plans? So that red line or minor amendment is included with that old plan set. So it's part of that plan set. So that in and of itself would then be renewed with the new permit, or the renewal permit.
So you still check the box that says there's no change to the plan?
Correct. Correct, because they've been reviewed and approved and found to be consistent.
Okay, how about range amendment?
We'll talk about that. I think there was one other question? Yes?
Yeah, if you go back to the example with the topsoil stockpile moving outside of the limit of disturbance and with that, suppose you move the topsoil stockpile outside and that's an off-site area. That increases your limit of disturbance, correct?
Correct.
Does the off-site areas that's being disturbed have to be accounted for in worksheets 12 and 13 as managed for water quality credit?
Maybe.
Move that stockpile outside of that, it's not an off-site, and you're increasing the boundary by, say, 1 acre, which is under the, say, the 25 acre zone. And you're, it's within that 10%. You're increasing it by the minor amendment. Does it make sense to reduce the limit of disturbance on the other side where your stockpile was to basically keep the LOD the same acreage, which would then translate into your worksheets 12 and 13?
Well, we're looking at his topsoil stockpile here, and it's and I want to be clear, because we can what if these to death. If there are project specific questions that you have, give us a call and we'll be more than happy to discuss them with you. To address the worksheet 12 and 13, Generally, the off-site support facilities, when you look into the FAQ document, those areas are there's certain criteria that you have to meet. Like, you can't put in a concrete batch plant and then use it for infinity. There's a finite time that is kind of set up with that, and those disturbances then have to be restored. They can't be kept as impervious. They have to be restored to existing conditions or better cover. So that being said, they probably wouldn't have to be counted in worksheets 12 and 13 because it's going to be something that's going to be restored.
12 and 13 count for your post-construction stormwater management. So water quality after construction,
Correct. So the question, it was more of a statement than a question. It was worksheets in 12 and 13 look at the post-construction condition of the project, not necessarily the during construction, which is correct. Yes, sir.
Two-part question. Partial notice of termination, do you have to resubmit the NOI with all the calculations adjusted to carve out the piece that you're closing?
So the calculations that you would have to change, and we haven't been through this process yet, so I'm going to give you what I think it is. I would imagine you'd at least have to adjust the NOI sections that deal with the permit boundary and the limit of disturbance. Those are the two questions. And now if you're looking at the rate, volume, and water quality, I don't think you'd have to go through and revise all of those because, yes, one of the conditions is that of NOT, a portion of the project, is that portion of that project complies with the rate, volume, and water quality sort of unto itself. So it's like if you have a basin and maybe some street sweeping and maybe some other things, and that portion of the project that you're terminating contains all of those pieces and all those parts, and it's basically a project unto itself, then you can terminate it. But if you have parts of stormwater controls that are located in other areas that aren't done yet, you wouldn't be able to NOT that section.
And then a follow-up question, do you have to pay the fees for that amendment?
You have to pay the fees for a minor amendment of, yes.
For a notice of termination minor amendment?
Yeah, there would be, and that would be whatever the Conservation District's fee schedule is, but there would be a fee associated with it. Yes, sir.
I know you were saying about the minor amendment, sending in the one copy for review and everything. Now, once everything goes into e-permitting, will there be a way to submit minor amendments to e-permitting?
That's a good question, and I've brought it up, and that's where it kind of ended. That's a good question. Moving right along. No, it's fine. It's something that's being discussed, and I don't have an answer for you at this time. I'm sorry, I forgot to repeat it. So the question is, will e-permitting be able to handle modifications, minor mods? And the answer is, I don't know. It's been discussed in very brief terms, but it may end up being a version 2 release of it. Stay tuned. Yes?
Do you have the same permit decision timeline guarantee with the minor mod?
No. But I will say, if it's a minor mod, generally it's you wouldn't want to be under the permit decision guarantee because you wouldn't want a minor mod to be extended out 107 days. And I'm going to speak for Monroe. Our minor mods go through really quick.
I've only done one. At that time, I thought it was 71 days when it went.
Yeah, and I can't answer what happened with that particular project. There may be other constraints that we're not privy to. So no, it does not apply. What's that?
There's no timeline.
There's no timeline. Okay. Moving on to major amendments. So this should be of no surprise. When you have projects with limit of disturbance that is less than 25 acres, you can disturb, if you disturb greater than 10%, it becomes a major amendment. Now, the same holds true for projects that are greater than 25 acres. If you go above that 2.5 cumulative net cumulative impact, limited disturbance, you now have to do a major amendment. Also, earth disturbances revisions, which may adversely affect PA or federally endangered or threatened species or critical habitat, would also push you into a major amendment. Change to the ENS or PCSM design standards. So when you're filling out your NOI, when they ask you how you're complying with PCSM, is it either chapter 102.8 something something something, or the 167 plan, or the alternative design standard. So if you're kicking, let's say you're proposing a BMP that is going to kick you into the alternative design standard, well, that would constitute a major amendment. New point of discharge or an increased discharge of stormwater, that's pretty self-explanatory. The elimination of structural or non-structural ENS or PCSM BMPs, or reduction in the dimensions or capacities of structural BMPs that affect the performance of those BMPs. So if you're changing the BMP and you're not keeping things the same, that would kick you into a major permit amendment. Construction of additional impervious or non-pervious surfaces not reported on the NOI, unless the proposed PCSM BMPs are capable of managing that increase in runoff without modification to the BMP. Now, that's sort of a tough one, and I don't know how many scenarios that would actually apply to. But it's in there nonetheless, so if you happen to come across that situation, it would be a major mod. A proposed site alteration that would allow new stormwater flows from off-site to flow onto the site, unless the ENS and PCSM plans are capable of managing the increase in runoff without modification. So let's say PennDOT comes in and they say, you know, we really need to bring this roadside swale into your basin. Well, that's obviously diverting more water into your basin, and chances are it's not going to function as designed. So you'll have to give us some calculations, and that'll become a major amendment. Now, if by chance it doesn't change anything, well, then it would be a minor mod, but chances are it would be a major amendment. Phase permit, where the initial application or NOI didn't address all the phases of the project. Not too many phase projects out there, but if you happen to have one, this would apply to you. Now here's some examples. Here's our friendly snowman, outlet control structure. Now, we're looking at this, we're going from an 8-inch orifice to a 10-inch orifice, and then we're changing our 6-inch orifice down there at the bottom. Rather than having it at elevation 1846, it's now at 1843, so that's a 3-foot difference, and we're changing our outlet pipe from a 24-inch pipe to a 4-inch pipe. Chances are this is going to be a major modification. There's a lot of things happening here that would push you into major mod territory. So the contractor wants to shift the basin excavation before the discharge work. Anybody see a problem with that? So you're going to have a basin with no discharge. I see a problem with that. It's just going to discharge wherever it wants. So this would more likely be a major modification, or even something that may not even be able to happen, depending on what other discharge capacity or discharge abilities they may have. They may be able to do something temporarily. I've seen basins where their discharge is miles long to get to a surface water. So I could see wanting to do something temporarily to get a basin done, maybe get some fill for the site as we talked about before. Poor bog turtle. I really couldn't think of another way to show this. So big red X on top of the bog turtle. So if you're impacting a federally listed or state listed T&E species, it's going to be automatically a major amendment. So here's another example. That big purple line, you have to excuse me, I'm not an artist, I'm an engineer. So that big purple line, that happens to be the Paradise Pocono Creek watershed. And just envision in your mind that the right side of that line is the Paradise, and we'll say that it's non-special protection. And Pocono Creek, which is the left side of that line, is special protection. So what's happening is you're doing a pretty minor change. You're moving the rock construction entrance and some of the access road just a little ways up the road, and you're going to get caught into a major permit modification. Why is that? Right, I heard it. I just don't know who I heard it from. You're switching from a general permit to an individual permit. So that would be a major modification. Now, something to keep in mind with major mods, a few years ago, I can't remember exactly when, it could have been yesterday, DEP did away with granting an extension, I'll say, or a renewal to the permit with a major permit modification. So it used to be if you got a major permit mod, you got your 5-year period started when that major mod was issued. That's not the case anymore. So it's something that you're going to want to consider moving forward as you're doing major modifications. If you're at a point in the project where things are going to get wrapped up, don't check the renewal box. But if you're at a point in the project where you may need some extra time on the back end, just check the renewal box. And then it will not only be a major mod, but it will also be a renewal. So, Rocco.
You can't diameter both at the same time?
Yes. Happens all the time.
We have trouble. We're on the other side of the mountain. Sometimes that gets you a little nervous for the client.
Yeah, we do it where both boxes are checked and they're issued at the same time. And when DEP issues a permit, or if it's a general permit, we issue it in-house or acknowledge it in-house, we set those dates accordingly. Any other questions? All right, so we're going to go into a lightning round. Now, each one of you has to answer these, or we're not going to leave. That really motivated people yesterday. I was surprised. So, okay, these are going to look a little familiar, but I just want to make sure you're paying attention. So here we're switching again from the super silt fence baffle to the plywood baffles. What would this be? Red line. We're adding 3 pipes to get away from that goonie. Minor with calcs. That was the best answer I heard. All right, so PennDOT says we need to have the entrance over here. Red line. Friendly snowman, things are just shifting, but all the elevations and diameters are all kind of staying the same. I heard red line, I heard major, and I heard minor. It's a red line. You're right, somebody is right. So now we have the stockpile, and it's being shifted less than a quarter mile away onto a neighboring property. Minor, there we go. Shifting the basin discharge work before the basin construction. Major, if at all. You got to be able to discharge it. Oh, there's the poor lonely bog turtle again. Major. Did I hear you say soup? God, you guys are animals. Stay away from that table over there. So now we have our friendly snowman again, but the snowman's getting some very different sized pipes and orifices and things. A lot of things are happening. Major. And that was it. So do I have any questions? I have a few minutes for questions. Anything?
And you were going to tell us what happened with the
Oh, geez, I forgot about things. So I kind of alluded to that. If you get a major amendment, that's a new permit being issued. So that next permit, that is, when it's renewed, it would be that new permit, Estelle, that's being renewed. So you would be able to check that box, as long as there's no plan changes, you would be able to check that box that says no plan changes, because it's a new permit. Yes?
I know that Mike has experienced this, I'm sure that others have, with existing developments that have started and failed, and restarted, and failed over the last 25, 30 years.
Sure.
That are fully improved with expired permits. What direction, guidance can you give the folks here on pre-apps and consider reactivating?
So the question is, with the downturn in the economy that happened, there were a lot of developments that had gotten started, maybe some of the public improvements were installed, maybe some of the PCSM BMPs were installed, and now they just kind of sit fallow, waiting for another developer to take over. And let's say you get a developer who wants to take over, but the NPDES permit that had been issued way long ago is now lapsed. It was never renewed. So you'd be looking at a new permit for that earth disturbance, more than likely, unless you're below 1 acre, which probably wouldn't be the case, because if it'd have to be a really small subdivision. But so if you're getting a new permit, it would be, you would be able to get credit for what ENS or what PCSM BMPs had previously been installed for whatever you can get credit for under the new regulations and program. But you would still have to, if there's riparian buffers, you'd still have to do the buffers, you'd still have to do the all the long-term O&M, you'd still have to do critical stages. It would be getting a new permit, but if you have existing PCSM facilities that are installed and functioning and were installed properly, you can get credit for those. Anything else? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Schallhammer.